Welcome to Want to Franchise Your Business? Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws.
Hello and welcome to Franchising Your Business, Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws with attorney Tim Pickwell. Tim has had a private law practice representing national and international restaurant, retail, distribution, and fitness studio franchise clients with an emphasis on franchise registration, disclosure, and relationship issues. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is the importance of legal counsel in protecting your franchise brand. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
So we started to talk a little bit about, I asked you last episode if people ever tried to do this themselves, and you gave one example that did not go well. So what are the primary legal challenges that franchisors face when it comes to protecting their brand?
Well, I think the first one is finding the right attorney. A lot of even my clients, maybe good business people, haven't hired a lot of attorneys in their life. And so hopefully, they find me or get referred to me. In fact, my greatest source of referrals is other attorneys who know what they don't know. They don't want to become a franchise expert. And they know I'm not going to, form entities or give employment law advice or anything else. We just focus on franchise matters. So it's not just finding an attorney, it's finding the right attorney. There are a lot of ethical consultants out there who can help with franchising, can help you really refine your concept before you go to market and help you position it, show you what competitors are doing and how you can distinguish yourself. Good consultants. And I work with those consultants and we're all happy. But there's also consultants, I kind of call them packagers, and they offer the world one-stop shopping. They're going to get you a franchise disclosure document, and then they're going to get you manuals, and they're going to put you on a big phone call with business brokers all over the country, and you're going to sell hundreds or thousands of franchises, and never works out. And what you get are really poorly drafted franchise documents that just use a word replace, don't actually fit your concept. Have a client who's a mobile food business, and their franchise agreement was for a sit down, inline location. Terrible. The manuals are very cookie cutter and aren't customized to your business. So, and of course, you never sell 100 franchises like that. So I'd say have realistic expectations and find the right counsel and get documents that represent your concept. And then focus on the franchisees. Make sure they share your values, they share your vision for your brand, that they're interested in the business. You'd be surprised every now and then some people buy a franchise and they actually don't like the restaurant business or they don't like the fitness business. Bad fit. And they always end up unhappy and consuming a lot of your time and damaging your brand. So, very important you work with the right people, and very important that you make sure franchisees share your values.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the sharing your values and want to do what it is you do. Because there's plenty of people who've gotten into the restaurant game and went, wow, this is not for me. So yeah, if you have a restaurant, you got to make sure that person that's a franchisee knows what they're getting into.
I worked in-house with a couple of restaurant concepts, was senior vice president, general counsel of a large restaurant chain. I certainly love that part of the business. But when I was a kid, my first job was washing dishes, and I hated that business. No, I would not make a good restaurant operator.
Nor would I. How does having legal counsel help ensure that your franchise's intellectual property, such as trademarks and logos, is all properly protected?
Yeah. So a big part of our job is really trying to anticipate everything that could go right or wrong in a relationship and have a provision for it, and make sure that the manuals address that as well. And number one is you want to protect that trademark and that brand, both by ensuring that it's registered, but that you use it properly, that you display it properly, and that our franchise agreements license it to the franchisee properly and clearly state who owns the mark and all the potential difficulties that might happen, but that at the end of the day, franchisor owns the mark, and if it's required to change it, then the franchisee has to change it. So that's number one. And then the intellectual property is what we often refer to as the manuals. It's the recipes, it's the know-how, it's the training. It's when I speak of manuals, I think of big paper manuals, and nobody does that anymore. The manuals are all on an intranet, password protected, and are updated frequently that way. But that's still the intellectual property, because what we're talking about here is business format franchising. And in a prior episode, I mentioned, go watch The Founder with Michael J. Keaton about Ray Kroc and McDonald's. And that's a business format franchise. They give you the layout of the kitchen, the design, the list of suppliers, so that all the products are uniform and the consumer has a uniform experience. And so a business format franchise is, whether it's a sandwich shop sit down restaurant or chain of fitness studios. The goal is that a consumer would have the same high quality experience at every unit that they went into, and that the units generally look alike, the layouts the same, fits the flow of the business and employees, that type of thing. So this is business format franchising, and our franchise agreements are very detailed. We think fairly sophisticated, and try to plan for every eventuality. In my career, really dating myself here, the internet came along, and then social media came along, and adapting to social media has been very interesting. And it's been very good for franchising. We used to focus on getting enough advertising revenue generated by franchisees so you could get on television. And virtually all my clients don't care about that anymore. It's all search engine optimization, it's all Facebook. And we try to make sure that franchisees can do local marketing, but very clear who owns the Instagram, who owns the Facebook page, or their pages on the franchisor's website. I had a client in the early days, they let franchisees make their own websites. It was a nightmare. It also dilutes your trademark, and there's all these names out there. It's very confusing and terrible.
That would be super confusing.
So you want to make sure you have an experienced franchise attorney who, has seen these issues and can help draft for them or around them and give you advice when they do arise.
Let's talk more about how you assist franchisors in preventing franchisees from misusing or diluting the brand. What you kind of touched on that a little bit with some of the stuff about the websites and all that, but could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, we hopefully have provisions in there, and hopefully everybody behaves, but sadly they don't. So, clients will contact me. They've learned of a problem. And of course, the very first question I ask them, what state is the franchisee in? Because that may determine how much time we are required to give them to correct the problem, if any, and how quickly we can move. And so we advise clients on handling franchisees who've gone off the reservation and how to, either gently get them to comply, or we can send default notices and threaten termination of their franchise business if they don't comply. Rarely gets to that, but we do often, have a client decide they have a problem with actually several franchisees in their system. And so we'll do a letter and send it out to 5 or 10 people and try to get that problem resolved before it gets even bigger.
And what legal strategies should franchisors use to protect their brand against potential infringement by competitors or unauthorized use by franchisees themselves?
You have to be diligent, keep an eye on your brand, and not misuse it. Silly little provision, but we tell franchisees, a lot of franchisees want to form an entity, right? They'll form a limited liability company to own their fitness studio or their restaurant. That's very fine. But we make sure that they can't use the franchisor's mark in the name. They can't be XYZ, restaurant company. We don't want the franchisor's brand or mark in their corporate name because, one, when we go after an infringer, they can point to 24 separate corporations or LLCs that use the name. And two, if a franchisee has legal problems, all anybody sees is the brand name in the lawsuit or in the employment matter or in the bankruptcy. Very little thing, but important. Don't let the franchisees use the brand name in their corporate entity. So we give advice like that. We'll write, nasty letters to potential infringers. One client has a matter right now. It's at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office Appellate Board, recommended an experienced counsel who does that type of work, and I think it's going to go well for them. So we steer them in the right direction, or hopefully have provisions in their franchise agreement to protect them from problems.
And what are the potential legal consequences for a franchisor if their brand standards are not consistently upheld across the locations?
Well, I try to take the position that we don't always have to be consistent, but obviously consistency is better, because the first thing some franchisee who's not in compliance will do is point out all the others with the same issue or doing things the same way. I was in-house with a restaurant concept, and we went after a franchisee hard because their restaurants were dirty, and they sent somebody in with a camera into the company-owned restaurants at lunchtime. And, they were trying to argue, see, your restaurants are dirty too. So you have to be consistent with your own operations. You have to be consistent with your own training, and much better to, nip a problem in the bud than to let things go out of control. Because we tell franchisees, look, we're going to, franchisees will say, wow, this franchise agreement's kind of tough. Doesn't give me a lot of room to wiggle, and, has a lot of provisions that box me in. We say that's intentional. We have owned the brand and the concept. This is how we want you to run it. When new good ideas bubble up, we'll change, but we're going to enforce that franchise agreement against you to protect you, and we're going to enforce it against other franchisees to protect you as well. So if you're all, marching in lockstep and everybody's operating the same way, value grows for everybody. But if we let one franchisee ruin the brand name, get the bad reviews online, it hurts everybody. So, one reason we tell them the franchise agreement is pretty, we'll hear it's lopsided or well, yes, it is. And that's why, because we're trying to protect the brand for you and the other franchisees and ourselves.
Do you have any examples where a franchisor was considering a franchisee, but that franchisee was trying to argue about the brand or the pricing or any of that kind of stuff?
I tell clients the best way to get rid of a bad franchisee is, just don't sign them in the first place. Yeah. And, sometimes franchisors are young and growing and they may feel desperate or they just want to get some numbers, but avoid that. I had one client, they were a big box gym concept and they're all about $9.99 a month membership, $9.99. And they'd get whole families walking in, everybody signing up for $9.99 each. Now, they would have add-ons and other deals, and they said their average price actually, once you start taking classes and do some other things, would get up to over $30. But their big advertising on TV, $9.99. And they were getting ready to sign an agreement with someone in the Bay Area. This guy had a lot of money and backers, and he was being very tough in negotiations. And at one point, he talked about the $9.99. He said, I don't think that's really doable. And they said, well, that's the basis of our whole brand.
That's like our brand, yeah.
Yeah. And he said, well, I understand that you can't, set prices. That's an antitrust violation. And so, I can change that price if I want to. And so they came back to me and they said, we're thinking we won't sell him a franchise. I said, I think it's a good idea. Don't sell him a franchise. He hasn't signed the agreement and he's already told you he's going to change the marketing and the whole identity of the brand. So they did not sell him a franchise and they're doing fine. They opened many, many other units and then sold the whole business. So I think avoided a problem with the guy right there.
I assume he was wrong about his antitrust claim.
A good question. We have language for that in the franchise agreement as well, because the United States Supreme Court has loosened the pricing requirements over the years, but not all states are in line. And California would be one of those states. So in some franchise agreements, or in some relationships, we tell the client, you can suggest the pricing, but you can't require it. Typically, franchisees get on board because there's some internet marketing strategy or there's some other marketing strategy.
Or it's a proven model, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And as they do marketing programs over the years, sometimes there will be a franchisee who doesn't want to go along and thinks they're going to lose money. And, it can depend on the state of the antitrust laws and antitrust legal decisions in each state. So we use that out in the franchise agreement. So we hopefully don't run afoul of those laws.
Interesting. In your experience, how does effective legal guidance contribute to a franchise's long-term brand reputation and sustainability?
The documents we create are the legal foundation of the business. And I have clients that have been doing this enough years that we're, 10-year term has gone up and we're doing renewals. And it's good to see what stood the test of time, but it's also, some of these renewals are a lot smarter now than we were 10 years ago. I wish we had this provision. But you need documents that support the business, are flexible enough to deal with changes. I mean, who saw all the social media coming 10 years ago? Lord knows what's going to happen with artificial intelligence right now and in the near future. So your documents need to be sophisticated, yet flexible, hopefully support your growth and your plans. So that's why we create a document that's FTC compliant, usable in all 50 states, and give advice on how to register in each of the registration states or apply for an exemption in places like Florida and Utah. So very important to get good legal advice in this area. And there's specialists out there like myself, and there's firms that do this. And then there's firms that, again, one of my greatest sources of clients, they're big firms, they're very good lawyers, and they just don't have any franchise experience and don't plan on getting it. So they send the work. It's a kind of interesting. I have represented franchisees here and there, pretty much no longer do that. And what's interesting to me, some prospective franchisees would be concerned about the cost of paying me. And I've been hired by lawyers who were buying a franchise, and I've been hired by a doctor whose wife was a lawyer. She found me and hired me for a medical franchise he was buying. But it always is interesting to me how the professionals know that they need to get good, solid legal advice and aren't afraid to go find it and pay for it.
It's a niche. And it certainly sounds to me like it's one that a lot of very smart, well-trained lawyers in various aspects of this kind of process aren't necessarily trained in that particular part of it.
That's the way I see it. Yeah, there's just not that many. We have a legal specialization in California. that the state bar implemented, I think it's 2007. And I was one of the first 24 to sit for the test and one of the first 6 in the state to get the certification and the designation. And if you go to the State Bar of California's website, there's thousands of specialists in family law or probate law. And the page for franchise specialists is relatively small compared to those other practices.
Well, good for you. You found a good niche.
I hope. Or maybe there's not that much business.
Yeah, or maybe there's not much business, or no one wants to do it because it's a nightmare. Who knows? Well, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there very glad that you have the expertise that you have, because this is certainly a complex area. And thank you for tuning in to Franchising Your Business, Intro to State and Federal Franchise Laws with attorney Tim Pickwell. To connect with Tim, visit pickwelllaw.com and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Tim, thanks so much for being here. Always appreciate all the insight.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.